Welcome back to Bite Size HR powered by Lutu One. Today, a special episode on a topic that actually got some of our colleagues to have a smile at it. So we're even more intrigued to discuss this further with my special guest today, David. But the title being Beyond the Pizza Party Myths, Uncovering the Real Drivers of Employee Engagement and Retention. To do so, as mentioned, special guest of today, David. Thank you very much for joining me today. Why don't you introduce yourself in a few short words for our audience?
Certainly. Thank you, Loic. Hi, everyone. My name is David Clark, and I am a strategic HR professional based here in the US in Washington, D.C. My areas of subject matter expertise focus on employee retention and turnover, employee listening channels, employee engagement, overall organizational effectiveness. Essentially, really helping companies understand specific HR solutions that can optimize employee outcomes and drive business results. So thank you for having me today.
Beautiful, and happy to have you. Well, let's get started. I mean, we do have an interesting title, we must say, and it's something we were just saying with David, that there's that weird feeling that we could have had this discussion years ago and hoped that we wouldn't still have to be discussing this. So maybe for our audience who might not be familiar with it, but I have a feeling a lot might connect the dots. But how would you define it, this concept of what exactly is the pizza party myths in your words?
Great question. So within the US HR space, a lot of people chuckle at the term pizza party. Essentially, the concept refers to regardless of how financially well a company performs, instead of rewarding that extra money to the employees and dispersing it amongst the workers who did most of the work, a lot of management will sometimes say, "Oh, let's just give them a pizza party or donuts. We'll make them happy. That should be enough, right?" To showcase, demonstrate our recognition and appreciation for them, and to help ultimately retain them. However, as any millennial or Gen Z worker knows, that is absolute bollocks. It is not the case. And so when it comes to the space of employee retention, we showcase and say that a pizza party is not the route to go. It is not going to help you retain employees. There is no data showing that giving your employees a free lunch is going to help retain them.
I would love to see someone come to us with actual statistic and saying they got two pizzas and holy cow, productivity went up.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, actually, on that note, and let's be honest, for both of us in being in the sphere for some time, retention and engagements, employee engagement and retention, we there's a clear understanding that there's a link between it, but it's still today something that is being discussed, is being debated, and still needs to be again showcased. And it really kind of brings me down to hear that we still need to re-explain it. So, David, considering this concept that you just mentioned with the pizza party myths and the impact it has on employee engagement and so on, for the audience, please take note on this. But what are common misconceptions around these topics?
Absolutely. So when people talk about employee engagement, well, just to level set, employee engagement has been an evolving, field within HR for several decades.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, it started off as just event planning, putting activities together, and really helping to improve and impact employee satisfaction. However, true employee engagement is so much more than that. Employee engagement is focused on how can you really optimize different aspects of the employee experience, which are going to yield beneficial employee outcomes, whether it be decreasing your turnover intentions, increasing your intentions to stay, increasing productivity, increasing innovation, and so on and so forth. Employee engagement is a data-proven approach to how to really bolster those positive employee outcomes. So unfortunately, a lot of companies these days still dismiss and downplay employee engagement as just event planning, putting on happy hours, putting on lunches, which is not the case necessarily. And I guess in terms of that, they also think that, oh, people tend to, when it comes to retention, just pay your employees more money and that always fixes the problem, which is also not the case. So what we're trying to look at is this conventional misconceptions that have really plagued employee retention strategies for so long, and really trying to disprove them and correct them by using data.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think that on that note as well. So employee engagement, yes, people think putting on pizza parties and essentially when it comes to traditional tactics, they think when it comes to retention, you want to wait until an employee is already threatening to leave. They already have an offer in hand from another company. They're looking to leave. However, they're willing to stay, for X amount of money. That is a more reactive approach to retention, and data shows that it does not work. If an employee gets to the point where they make the cognitive decision to look for jobs elsewhere because of whatever's happening internally, it's already too late. Whenever a retention bonus or something is offered to them, it's mainly reactive and buying the employee time. At least in the US, there is no legal requirement for someone to stay at a company if they receive a retention bonus. Usually it just forestalls the inevitable. They may take a retention bonus now, but then they'll still keep looking, and several months down the road, they'll eventually leave. So what I find is important is to really understand when we talk about employee retention, we're looking at it through the employee lens, not the employer lens. We want to understand what are the cognitive steps that an employee is taking that is compelling them to leave and look for jobs elsewhere.
Completely agree, and I feel, of course, we have to be careful. There's a difference between each cultures in regards to the retention strategy, but also to the exits of an employee. So, but completely agree with you. At the end of the day, once an employee, as David said, once an employee made his decision that he's leaving, you've got maybe, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 months left to really make a difference on that. But usually companies wait till the very end to actually try to make an impact. And realistically, as you said, even if the employee did stay, let's say he get a raise, as you clearly mentioned, it's just a little extra waiting, but it's still not going to stop that motion that has been anchored by that person, right? For the audience who may not be aware, and to kind of back it up what David was saying, well, a Gallup study found that companies with highly engaged workforce outperformed their peer by 147% in earning per share. Frankly, there's much more than just a Gallup study. There's plenty of studies out there, which we highly recommend you checking out. Also, some of the articles that David has written that we'll be linking as well with this podcast. But if we kind of skip that one and go more into the actual approach of how do you evaluate those aspects. So, for instance, I think we're mostly aware that employee engagement is something that can be identified via surveys. But I feel that it's a very good point, and it's something we had discussed in the past about what are the aspects that should be kind of identified within the surveys to better understand why maybe employee engagement might not be working that company. Because a survey is just a nice fancy word, but then you have to back up that survey in a way that actually makes sense for the employee to take and for you to have relevant data, which you clearly mentioned as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just as you mentioned, employee engagement surveys are very effective measurement tools to really understand and assess the current state of your employee population. So when we talk about employee engagement surveys, we're talking about something more than just employee satisfaction. Employee satisfaction is just a common point in time, and that's it. Saying, how is everyone feeling today? What are people's current challenges? That is focused on today's, employee experience. However, that may not always be the case. It may decline, it may improve down the road. So in order to have an effective, robust employee engagement survey, it needs to be future focused, and it needs to be focused on the employee's perspective. So for example, framing the question to say, I feel motivated in my job. I feel supported by my manager. I see a future for myself at this company. I have the resources and opportunities to progress in my career. These are more future-oriented, future-focused questions, which really help to give you a more future focus in the long term for your employees. So instead of focusing on just the current state right now, we want to focus on what is the current state for how employees are looking towards the future. Where do they see themselves? That itself ties in directly into employee retention. So if you have a lot of employees who are answering negatively to questions about seeing themselves there for long, it shows you have a retention problem and something is compelling them to leave. That should be a red flag that companies need to recognize and conduct further analysis and research into.
Just interesting point you mentioned here. We have seen it with previous podcasts when it comes, for example, also at the importance of these of understanding the employee engagement via Gauge, and we've identified as well with Robin Corrales, which I highly recommend checking out the podcast for the audience. But it was kind of understanding how do you financialize the return on investment of employee engagement. Now, not looking to get off topic here, but just to emphasize that point in the sense that it was through that podcast that we did identify that you can showcase to a CFO in your company the actual value behind it from a financial standpoint. Because yes, of course, different decision makers in the company will look at these aspects differently and therefore need to be argumented to why this is so important in a different approach, right? We all speak a different language. That's how it works sometimes, unfortunately. But in regards to that, you did mention as well for the data approach that it's something really, really important because you have this data, right? And you can predict potentially what could happen, right? And well, for us at Lucha One, that's exactly what we try to bring on the market. But just as a side note that I wanted to ask, because I feel that that's still something that's barely really considered. It's still very presented as, well, let's do a survey, let's get the results, and then we'll send it to a department and they'll take care of it. And I feel that once we get to the actual, what do you do with the data? What's the next step? Is still sometimes undervalued. Is there anything you'd like to add? I know this is slightly off, but if there's anything you wish to add on that, I feel it could be interesting as well.
Sure, definitely. So taking a step back, when we're looking at any type of employee listening mechanism, whether it be surveys, focus groups, high-level interviews, so on and so forth, when employees take the time to provide their true, honest feedback and their, I guess, praises or dismays about what's working or not in the company, they're expected to see some type of action taken. Simply collecting the data, reviewing the results, that's not enough. You need to take it a step further. So what I find is most helpful, and a lot of research shows, once you've conducted your data collection and analysis and really pinpointed areas of opportunity, it's best to take action in those areas. And you can also do it on a more decentralized basis. So for example, in large organizations, let's say, with thousands of employees, different departments have different nuances and different challenges their employees may be facing. Some companies, if people work in a call center, flexibility or burnout may be a big challenge for them. Whereas folks who maybe work, let's say, in the sales department are facing stress with, meeting their quotas. And so that being said, when it comes to developing and deploying action plans, they should be department specific, not necessarily company wide. And they need to align with the findings you have from your data collection. So what I find is best is looking at, within an employee engagement survey, you have different thematic categories. For example, work-life balance, professional development, career longevity, so on and so forth. What I find is best is once you've determined which of these areas are lower scoring in the survey and there needs to be some type of action intervention, form an action plan focused on that thematic area and leave it up to the individual department to determine which type of plan they'd like to do. So for example, if one division wants to improve their career development scores, they might think of what is a career development course we can provide for our employees. Can we have some type of tuition reimbursement program put together for them? And the intention of deploying this data-driven action plan is to hopefully improve those scores the next time around the survey, to show you identified a lower scoring area, you took action to address it, and you will hopefully see an improvement in those scores down the road. And these are all thematic elements of the employee experience, which could ultimately influence outcomes such as retention and turnover.
I love how you didn't generalize it. It wasn't, here's the results. Let's implement one action plan for the whole company, right? I really love how you had that personalization type of approach, the personalized call to action. For the audience, I do apologize. It seems that my lovely dog is walking in the background. So if you hear some footsteps, no, we do not have an extra guest coming along, or at least she can't speak yet. But on that note, and it is connected to one of your article, which we'll also be listing in this podcast. But in your article, you mentioned that many leaders misinterpret what drives employee engagement and retention, which is kind of also what we're discussing right now. But I feel that the focus on this question is more towards towards leaders. For instance, SHRM study was 52% of employees cited that respect and recognition as key drivers. Why do you think leaders in particular often overlook those factors?
Great question, Loic. And I would say that this statistic refers to a greater challenge that we face all the time in HR. The nature of HR, we're not revenue generating. We're not bringing in new customers. We're not bringing in clients. And so that being said, we tend to be overlooked in terms of the results and the impact that we can have on a company. However, that being said, on the flip side, once employees are brought onto a company, who's managing them? Who's keeping them here? Who's assisting their career development? It's HR. So I like to say to people that although HR may not be revenue generating, we are cost and risk reduction. we are cutting costs, we are avoiding risk, or at least minimizing them. And that also itself does tie to aspects of employee retention and turnover. So, for example, when we talk about employee recognition and respect, it goes greater into what I mentioned about the employee perception of the
Hmm.
employee experience. There's different aspects and different actions that can enrich an employee's experience. Within the employee retention space, we have a term called job embeddedness or job anchoring. And that
Okay.
itself is basically considered the extent to which an employee is satisfied, engaged, and rooted in their job, which directly influences retention. So the more embedded someone is in their job, the less likely they are to leave. The less embedded and tied someone is to their job, the more likely they are to leave. And so when we talk about employee different aspects like employee recognition, respect, and engagement, those can all enrich and bolster employee job embeddedness. So I think that a lot of leaders may tend to look at the dismiss recognition and respect as an afterthought because it may not be revenue generating. What I find is important as HR professionals is to really coach them by leading with a business problem. So, for example, citing increasing rates of employee turnover. Hey, we've invested this much money and time in recruiting these employees and bringing them on. However, they ended up leaving within this many months. This is terrible ROI, and this is a problem. Not only are we losing money and time, we're also facing disruptions in workflow and
Hmm.
potentially in
Yeah.
client delivery. So that being said, I find it very important to lead with the business issue, to say, look, this is an issue we're having, increasing rates of turnover, specifically in this employee population. And these are some recommendations of how we could improve it. So I know to go on a bit of a sideline here.
No,
When
but
it
very good point.
when it comes to data collection, you want to be able to gather data from your employees throughout all aspects of the employee experience, not just in exit interviews. So, for example, while it's helpful to understand, oh, why did someone leave? What were some issues they were facing? Taking that data and using it to really improve your retention strategy. You also want to gather that data while the employees are here. So, what I find is helpful is trying to collect data with what I call stay questions, employees retention questions. You can sprinkle these questions throughout your engagement surveys, pulse surveys. You could even conduct stay interviews, really asking employees about what aspects of your job do you really like? What keeps you coming back to work every day? What are some recommendations or ideas that you might have for how we can improve retention of employees? That itself is a great way to uncover some really valuable nuggets, which could help influence employee retention. I know that there's been growing demand and recognition over the past few years with the impact of employee respect recognition and from senior leadership. To make, especially for younger generations, we're more accustomed to having more real-time feedback. It's very important for leaders to provide that, whether it be through a formal recognition program, a kudos program, something along those lines, where they're really giving managers the option and opportunity to give, a positive, timely acknowledgement to their staff.
Completely agree. Quite a few different factors that you mentioned there that I think are quite relevant. But looking at it from a finance point of view, and just to kind of close that initial beginning of the story that we had with the employee engagement aspect, but most importantly, with once the employee has decided to leave and the monetary aspect that it won't make a difference. But what would you say are some of the key factors that are fueling turnover? Because we've already highlighted some here, but from your article on the top three factors fueling voluntary turnovers, what might they be?
Great question. So, contrary to popular belief, money is not the top factor why people leave a company. That's actually ranked as number three. The number one factor why people leave a company is poor management, bad management relationship. There's a popular phrase in the US and the UK that goes as people don't quit their jobs, they quit their managers. Someone can have a great job that they love, it's well aligned with their skill set and background. But if they have a terrible manager who's micromanaging them, they have a toxic relationship with, they're going to get up and leave. On the flip side, someone could hate their job. It's not the best fit for them. They're not a big fan of it, but they will stay at a company longer if they have a very supportive, hands on manager who is there supporting them. And the reason we talk about this, it does tie into aspects of the employee experience. Common knowledge and data will show that managers are the main drivers of the employee experience. When you're working at your job, whatever your level is, who are you reaching out to on a regular basis? Who are you having one-on-one check-ins with? Your manager. Who do you go to for questions or issues or guidance on your projects? Your manager. Your manager is the day-to-day touch point you're having in your job. And so that being said, it's really important for these individuals to understand how to manage people and not just projects. So that being said, the impact of a manager is the number one reason why employees leave their jobs. The number two reason is actually lack of career development and lack of career growth opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, employee engagement and retention needs to be more future focused. When you have employees come to a company, you don't want them to see it just as a job. You want them to view it as a career. You want to start having career development discussions from day one in new hire orientation. You want to make it very clear that you have a designed and instituted career development path for all employees coming in. You want to showcase what types of learning opportunities you have, whether it be through a learning management system or an external course catalog or conference opportunities. You want to make it very clear to your employees, look, you were here. We understand you might have your role today, but you might want to progress down a path. You might want to go up the one traditional path into senior management one day, or you might want to go down a more technical path and become a subject matter expert in your role. It's very important for companies to offer some type of career development future for their employees, because if they can't get it at your company, they will look for it elsewhere. At the end of the day, employees are looking for a career with stability, a decent, reliable paycheck, and opportunities for growth and enhancement. And if your company cannot provide growth and enhancement, you are going to lose staff.
Kind of connects with what we were just stating about the recognition aspect, because of course having a loyal employee is an employee also who's being recognized for his work, but also recognized in terms of he has a view, he has a vision, and he didn't enter a company with the idea of, at least we would hope not, that he didn't enter a company with the idea of just I'm taking a job. It's even better if you can get someone who came into the industry with this concept, this mindset of, because let's be honest, in today's world we live in, of course, there's cost and everything. So of course we need a job. But if you can turn that into, not only are we here to provide you a paycheck at the end of the month, we also want you to feel part of something, and we want you to feel that we want to help you out. If you feel you want to be an expert there, if you feel like you want to grow in this specific position, or if you want to be a manager, tell us what your goal is. Let's not wait till we get to the performance management, usual yearly review. God, no. Just from the beginning, he's full of joy, full of excitement. This is the moment to ask him, where do you want to go? But I don't want to hear those questions of the interview. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? No, God, no. Not that approach, please.
And you're absolutely right, Loic. And here's what I would say as well. So I know a more popular analogy these days is like when someone is starting at a job, it's almost like when someone's going on a date. If someone, let's say, is at a point in life where they're looking for their life spouse, they want to find someone to settle down with and build a family with and have a future with. You should treat it similar to when they look at starting a new job in a similar way. When they start a new job, they start with orientation day one and they learn about the company. They want to learn about their future at the company as well. They want to say, do they see themselves, do they see them have a future staying at the company? What opportunities do they see for themselves there? Is there a defined career path? It's almost like when someone's dating. If someone goes on a date and they learn, okay, this is what the person is looking for. They want a long-term, commitment. They want to have a family and settle down. If that's what you're looking for as a person, great. A job should be no different. When you come start a new job, you want to understand what's the future hold, what opportunities do you have coming down the road. It's great to have that. On the flip side, if a company does not have a defined career path, that's really a bunch of, it's a bunch of gray areas. There's really no defined standardized approach. If that's something you're looking for as an employee, you're not going to see a long future at the company.
Yeah, and they're going to see a high turnover. Don't get me wrong, I know some industries need there's the concept of a healthy turnover as well, which can also be discussed. So it really depends on the industry, but let's not get into that because that's a topic of itself. But since we did already I think at this point, the whole top of the iceberg has been well presented, but now let's kind of dig into how do we do that aspect with the strategy aspect, because David, you've got quite a few various organizations that you worked in, and you've already implemented and proven with your articles that you have an idea of how it works when it comes to engagement retention strategies. But for audience, what are some successful data-backed strategies you've seen that genuinely improve employee satisfaction, reduce turnover, And maybe as an example, I've seen on your CV that you worked with Maximus or Jaco. Is there anything there that you might have seen that could be shared to your audience?
So I will speak just in general from
Yes, please.
strategies that have worked as well, rather than anything employer specific. I speak on behalf of myself as an independent guest speaker. So here's what I would say. I think that when it comes to employee retention engagement, it's important to understand there is no one size fits all solution. You need to understand that there are nuances in different divisions of a company, especially for larger ones, and really understanding the unique stakeholder challenges they are facing. So for example, at a prior company, I realized that a large portion of the company, had more of a flexible schedule. They could work on site, work remotely as they choose. However, a smaller portion of the population had to work on client site, where they did not have regular access to company email, company, mobile devices, so on and so forth. So when it came to engaging them, creating opportunities for connection, it would require a lot more accommodating of their schedules, understanding those challenges. So for example, with this specific population at a prior company, we wanted to find our employee engagement survey revealed a craving for more employee connections and networking. They wanted a chance to connect and meet other people from other divisions of the company. However, given the restrictions with their client side work, they weren't able to come to the office to meet other people as well. Mm-hmm. So what I decided to do was, based upon that data, is really design some type of accommodated alternate networking opportunity. So scheduling networking activities after work hours and having it at a restaurant that was near their client site versus the actual office, and then making sure we invited employees from different divisions to come to that opportunity that day. I think it's always important when you are trying to create a space for networking, you want to make sure it's a safe space for people to come to, psychologically safe. You also, getting a budget to have a company pay for appetizers is also a great beneficial way. If you pay for food, they will come. It's a really great approach to take. And so I could definitely say that that is one example of really having a more targeted, customized approach, understanding populations of your workforce that may not be able to access what you are scheduling on a regular basis, and try to provide a more customized, tailored event for them to really help address areas they're looking for. So in this situation, it was a need for them to have more networking exposure and opportunities to engage with their colleagues, and really using that opportunity to create a special networking event for them offsite after hours on a semi-monthly basis.
But again, this was something specific for this organization that you asked, as you clearly mentioned. But I feel that even for audience, because we do have a lot of people working remotely, myself including, with clients around the world, it's always a bit harder. And any tips you might be able to provide when it comes to cases of actual employees being in completely different countries where they might not have the chance? Because I think that's quite a tough one, that still today there's not a million ideas. I mean, I've seen those. I literally saw once an organization that would organize these like online karaoke session on Zoom. I didn't even know that was a thing. To be frank, when I saw that online, I was like, that actually looks fun. But any actual tips you might be able to give that have proven successful to a certain extent?
Sure, definitely. So taking a step back, whenever you're designing a strategic employee engagement or retention strategy, the key aspect is employee data from your employees. Yeah. You want to get some insights from them. Yes, there might be recommendations out there for different types of virtual engagement opportunities, like you mentioned, employee karaoke or a virtual cooking class, what it may be. But here's the thing: at the end of the day, is it smarter sitting in a room and trying to brainstorm random ideas and throwing them out there, or actually getting some feedback and insights from your employee population? I definitely recommend going with the latter. If you're going to spend the time and the money organizing different engagement activities, whether it be virtual or on-site, you need to get your employee feedback and insights to really gauge what their interests would be. So what I find is very helpful is having a mini post survey go out to your employees when you are starting to plan and prepare for any type of employee engagement activities, for example, and you can send them to employees who are both on-site, hybrid, or virtual. And you can really ask them, say, hey, what are some ideas for events you're looking for? And you can even break them down into categories. Do they want more social activities? Do they want professional development activities? Do they want virtual lectures or lunch and learns? Do they want networking activities? And I think that doing so is a really great way because you're going to get some data really showing you what the preference is. And based upon that data, you can go ahead and formulate your activity schedule. Or alternatively, if you want to go ahead and research, oh, here are 10 different types of activities I'd like to do, you can add that to the survey and have the employees rank them in order of preference. Doing that is showing you not only what is the employee appetite for doing these virtual engagement activities, it also shows you which the most popular ones are going to be. So let's say you send out a survey and everyone unanimously says they want to do, virtual karaoke. Okay, the data shows virtual karaoke is a popular option. We can safely put our money into organizing that, and we should be able to see great attendance.
And don't
And
forget
that is
to
something
ask. Don't forget to ask as well after what they thought about it so that you can have a better understanding of how to improve. And yes, completely agree. Again, we come back to data aspect, which I do have a question on now, which I'll get to in just a minute, because of course data is extremely important. But in where was I with that? Trying to find my words here, but yes, I was going to ask as well when it comes to this aspect about the data and how you should ask your employees to better understand the engagement strategies should be there and so on and so on, kind of brought me back to what we were saying in the beginning, that little honeymoon phase of relationship. You don't want to go on a date and then you pick a restaurant that only you will like. Try to figure out something that might impress her. Try to, put some thought into it and get some feedback, get some input so that it can help you in that right direction. Of course, if you want to go for a surprise, that's going to be a different problem. But again, there is that little aspect of we already do this in our daily life. So companies should already have that concept kind of implemented, because, yeah, it's just thinking about the others around, what they might like, adjusting it to them. And not only is it a question of you found the best activity, it also once again shows that you put some recognition to employees and that you're giving them a chance to speak and to share their opinion on something. And they're going to remember that. They will. It's not, we're humans. Of course we love if we're being heard. It's simple as that. But data is extremely important. And well, we've mentioned it, employee retention strategy, that data is extremely important. But what type of data should companies be collecting to influence the design of their retention tactics?
Absolutely. So when we talk about data, I know a lot of HR folks might be a bit more terrified of the term. What I think it's important to do is that it can be very simple. It can be simply getting feedback through your annual engagement survey, quantitative and qualitative feedback. So quantitative feedback, it could be people responding to survey scales on a Likert scale, different scores. Qualitative feedback, we're looking for free text comments and really analyze them to understand the themes as well. And just as you mentioned, anytime you want to design and deploy some new type of people initiative, whether it be a retention strategy, employee engagement strategy, you always want to have data from before the actual launch of the strategy to really understand the current state and identify the pain points. And then also after the implementation of the strategy to really understand, have these areas improved, have more issues come about. So what I find is very helpful when we are looking for data, you want to collect data at multiple goalposts throughout the initiative. Before the actual initiative launch, you also want to do it, I'd say, about 1 month after the initiative launch as well, to really understand if we are meeting the mark, if we have any other issues coming up. And then based upon that feedback, you want to go ahead and identify how you can make revisions. So for example, let's say a company is designing an employee recognition program. They conducted a survey beforehand. They understand employees are craving some type of recognition, and you decide to design a program. You don't want to design it and launch it and say, here we go, it's up and running. That's not always the best approach. What you want to do instead is you want to test it first with a smaller population, a pilot group. Say, look, here's our recognition program. We're going to pilot it, have people go in and test it. After 1 month maximum, you want to send out a quick survey to them to get some reactions and feedback from them. You want to understand from them, how do they like the platform? Is it easy to use? Yep. What are the challenges they're facing? Are there any technical issues you need to be aware of? Do they have any recommendations for improvement? Really providing a two-way channel for open communication with your employees is pivotal. Not only are you going to get real-time feedback from them, but you're involving them in the decision-making and design process. That itself is a powerful way to enhance not just their job embeddedness, but also their overall employee experience. If they feel like you mentioned they're being heard and they're being involved in helping to design and influence a company initiative, it's going to, really bolster their intentions to stay. And so
Couldn't
after
agree
that,
more.
the next round of data collection would be, once you've expanded the initiative to be more company wide, you want to have another goalpost of data collection. Again, to understand what people think about it, what's working well, what are some recommendations for improvement. I always find it best giving folks the opportunity to share their suggestions for improvement. Whether or not your management team wants to hear it, it's best to provide that as well. Because more often than not, when you have employees sharing ideas that come to their mind, it could be something great you could use to either influence the current program or to identify a future program that could be implemented to help improve employee outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that the only thing we could add on top of that is simply saying that for a large organization that might listen to us, because of course it's always a bit harder when you have 10,000 employees to have that approach. Keep in mind there are tools out there, including the one that's brought in bringing us to this podcast, Luto, one that are here to help you with automating those steps so you can really put your core focus on what matters, your people at the end of the day. And when coming to this, and also because I feel that we could be probably recording 5 podcasts with David, because this was a great discussion, but as we don't want to take too much of your time either, coming kind of down to the end, but for companies looking to improve their retention rates, what are some practical data driven steps they can take to start creating a more engaging and supporting work environment? And a second point in regards to that, how can platforms such as the one as we're mentioning now, analytic tools play a role in this transformation?
Certainly. So on that note, I'm going to make a few bold statements right
Hmm.
now. I first want to start by explaining the effectiveness of current tactics and then proposing some alternate ones for folks to consider.
Please.
So one thing I would say, so current retention tactics now, we talk about the following: exit interviews, collecting data from people once they've already decided to leave the company. And then also retention bonuses, paying someone a bonus once they've threatened to leave in order to keep them to stay. Exit interviews. While exit interviews sometimes might be the only type of data collection available, the data itself can be flawed. Firstly, only about 50% of departing employees will actually conduct an exit interview. And out of those who actually conduct it, only about half of them are very truthful. If an employee has had a terrible experience with their manager or the job itself, and they either don't feel comfortable disclosing the reasons why they're leaving or they just don't care, you're not going to get that data. You're not going to
Yeah.
uncover what the issues are that compelled them to leave. And so retention bonuses, similarly, I would say, when issues at the company get to a point where the employee makes the cognitive decision to leave, it's already too late. They've made the decision to leave. They took the effort to update their resume, submit their resume out, interview for jobs elsewhere, get an offer, and present it to you. Sometimes they do it as a way to get more money, but the problem is paying them a retention bonus, it's not guaranteed. You legally cannot keep them there. They might just be doing it to get a higher salary and then might leave eventually in the next few months. So I find that those two traditional tactics are not effective at long-term retention. However, on the flip side, there are some tactics that are effective to help you really design a more robust, proactive retention program.
Hmm.
These tactics are known as stay interviews, turnover propensity index in surveys, gathering employee insights, and conducting data-driven action plans. So stay interviews. If people conduct exit interviews for people who are leaving, why not conduct stay interviews for current employees who are there, especially engaged and productive and high top performing employees? A great way to do so, it helps you gather some data, as I mentioned before, to really understand from employees what do they like about working at the organization? What parts of their job do they enjoy? What are some recommendations for improvements? What are some challenges they've come across, either them themselves or their colleagues? Having those stay interviews can be a really powerful way to understand what are some issues that are probably going to compel employees to leave and help you understand where you need to intervene before they decide to leave. Similarly, you could also have what's called a turnover propensity index in your engagement survey. Now, when we talk about engagement surveys and indices, an index is basically a group of questions that tie to a specific topic and ultimately measures the likelihood of something occurring. So turnover propensity. You can implement, I'd say, a handful of questions within one of your existing surveys and have them tied directly to the propensity of someone who's looking to leave. So for example, a key question is, I see a future at the company within the next 12 months. I feel motivated in my job. I have a supportive and collaborative relationship with my manager. Questions like this can help you determine what's the turnover propensity. Are people going to stay at this company long, or are they going to leave? And that itself can help you really gauge what is the turnover likelihood in certain divisions across your company. Again, it's a more proactive way to do so. When it comes to retention, you want to know well beforehand, where are the fires? Where are the challenges happening? Where do we as leadership need to intervene to help address any issues before these employees decide to leave? And then I'd say third on that note, really just understand to really put in place employee listening channels to gather data on a regular basis. Having an annual survey is great, it's fantastic, but you can also be doing more. You want to be able to gather data at different stages of the employee life cycle. So first and foremost, when new hires come on board for the new hire onboarding integration phase, you want to collect feedback from them within, I'd say, at least the first month of them being there. Hey, how was your onboarding experience? How was orientation? Does this job match your expectations? Are there any challenges you're facing? And at the end of it as well, to understand, how is their training? Do they feel like they've been supported? How is their interaction with their manager? Do they feel like they've been onboarded appropriately? That itself is going to give you valuable insights, because from what we've seen, new hires are not shy about providing feedback. They will tell you up front what the problems are. And it's helpful for leadership to understand, because you only have one chance to make a first impression. And if your new hires are having a terrible experience, you need to know about that so you can intervene and correct it. Because if you don't, they are going to leave, and that is wasted time and money in bringing them on. And then similarly as well, just really trying to get some additional data, throughout the year on different aspects of the employee life cycle. When it comes to, in the US, companies do an open enrollment for employee benefits every year. If you want to understand any ideas or feedback from your employees about their benefits, that's a great way to do so. Create a mini pulse survey, send it out to them early in the year, and understand, how is the process for enrolling your benefits? Are there any other benefits we should consider looking into? That itself will help you determine which decisions to make when you're renewing your benefits for this following year. Or similarly, for employee career development opportunities, you can even ask employees, hey, what are some ideas you have for employee development? Do you need a more informal mentorship program? Are there any courses we should consider adding to our LMS? Are there any external conferences we should consider funding for people to go to? These are really great ways to not only gather ongoing employee insights, but also to involve them in the decision-making process.
Continuous approach, I feel, is the kind of the conclusion. We're seeing it more and more in Europe. It's true. I'm not certain myself, at least from what I'm hearing. I'm not going to say it firsthand, but it's still not entirely there, the continuous approach when it comes to feedback in the US. Again, not generalizing it, just from what I'm hearing overall, right? But that being said, yes, I completely agree with you. And I would even push it further, because the continuous approach shouldn't be just limited to what was stated. And I'm certain you didn't wish to limit it either there, but something as simple as you change offices, or your company is about to to move to a new office. You can ask them how they feel about the new office, because of course you want them to feel comfortable. Maybe some of them might be living 2 hours away instead of the 30 minutes away, and that's going to have an impact on their decision making of, okay, I feel comfortable still working in this company, and so on. Now, it's a lot, yes, but for organization listening to us, you don't need, and we do not, neither me or David recommend you writing down those questions of surveys on the paper and hoping that they're going to work. Now, there's plenty of tools out there, including One, that to support you as well in terms of understanding what are the questions that have been tested that actually make sense from a psychological level and are engaging. Because at the end of the day, there's no value in creating a survey that you copy paste every 3 months or whatsoever. It's not going to be engaging. You want your employees to feel like they're being heard, and for that they need to feel like it changes, so that there's evolvement and so on, right? But to close it off, and slightly off of the initial question we had in mind for the closure, but still, we are talking about pizza party mitts, and I feel that we should bring it back. But for an organization who plans to have that pizza party very soon, what would be that one advice you would give to them right now?
Certainly, yeah, definitely. So I would say that the essentially my main takeaways here are the following. Number one, it's better to be proactive versus reactive when addressing employee retention. You need to be more proactive in gathering insights from your staff and understand what the challenges are, and not just simply reacting to it. Reactive approaches don't work; they're not long term. And then in terms of the pizza party myth, I would say you really want to show you instead of just throwing out an archaic solution you think might help keep people there. Invite feedback from your employees. Understand from them what can you do to help improve their retention. Who knows? If you ask them, they all say a pizza party. Okay, then you have your answer.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. I was true. I completely forgot that aspect. Who knows? That could work as well.
Again, the key thing is well, you want to be able to create that two-way communication channel with your employees. You want to make it very clear to them, hey, if the company did financially well, we want to be able to share that with our staff. Sometimes we're able to do so, other times there's limitations, but you want to understand from there, what can you do to improve, the company's aspect. So for example, I'll say quickly, in the US, there's more restrictions on individual taxation for compensation, but then there's other aspects of the employee experience, such as benefits and other perks as well, or stipends, which can be given out that have different taxability treatments too. So I think it's a matter of getting feedback from your employees to understand what would they like to see to keep them engaged and to keep them recognized, and really using their insights to develop and influence a strategy. Just Googling something online, that's only one part of the process. You need to hear from your employees to really validate and understand which of these tactics will resonate with them.
Thank you. Well, that's a good way of concluding it. Indeed, there could be a situation where the pizza party actually was a good idea. I didn't think of it that way, but good point. Well, in all cases, David, thank you so very much for coming at the end of our time here, since we are almost 3 minutes left pretty much till the meeting ends. But David, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you very much for all the great input you've provided to our audience. Check out the LinkedIn profile, check out the articles they'll be listed. If you'd like to read and learn a bit more, feel free to reach out to David, of course, as well, if you have any further questions. But of course, as well, since it is, we're not here to hide it as well. We had a lot of discussion here that also kind of aligns with solution to find. So feel free to reach out to me or to the one who are powering this podcast, who are more than happy to also help you with those difficulties that you might be facing, whether you are a manager or simply an employee, and so on. But in all cases, thank you very much to our audience and to you, David, and we wish you a great rest of your day. Take care.